listening to the Decarbonisation Dialogue, a podcast from Salix.
Welcome to Delivering on Climate Change, our collective challenge. Welcome to the Decarbonisation Dialogue. I am Hannah Walker, and I believe that the best way to communicate a message is by being passionate about what you are talking about. Today, my guest is Roli Martin, who is Managing Director and Head of Finance at Global City Futures, which is a consultancy specialising in practical funding solutions for public sector net zero projects. So Roli works with local authorities, for example, NHS trusts, as well as education estates to develop commercially robust business cases for decarbonisation, focusing on blending public and private capital to achieve sustainable net zero infrastructure, because, of course, we can't do anything without the finance. So welcome to Roli, my guest today, and really looking forward to understanding the finance behind these projects. I know you're a chartered accountant with more than 20 years of experience, and you've also previously been leading a Big Four corporate finance infrastructure advisory practice. So huge amounts of experience. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you.
Not at all.
Now, Roli, can you just tell us, to start with, a little bit about your own career journey and what drives you to this mission and obviously to Global City Futures? Tell us a little bit about what that is and what you do.
So I began as a chartered accountant, took that wide and well-trodden path of getting my articles and, becoming an auditor and all that kind of stuff. And then sort of moved up the ranks at a Big Four company, at Deloitte, and got increasingly frustrated that you couldn't get a lot done. Lots of red tape, lots of things in the way. I guess at the same sort of time, it was an emerging industry in terms of net zero infrastructure. And all my experience up till, once I escaped audit, all my experience was in the infrastructure space and helping public sector organisations, it occurred to me they needed a lot of help that outside of the day-to-day. So, if you can imagine a hospital, they're firefighting all day trying to treat people, and a school they're firefighting trying to teach people. Local authorities are running social care programs. They've got so much to do that is not infrastructure and not finance and not anything outside the core, that it must be really hard. It must be really difficult to kind of put all this stuff together. And I was just observing that they needed a lot of help. And then as the kind of net zero industry and clean energy industry emerged, it was just another thing that they were forced to be doing, or stuff that we needed to do but had no real experience of doing. Combined with not being able to get anything done at a big company, I thought, well, it's time for a change, and I need to put myself in an environment where I can get in front of the right people at the right organisations to get things done.
Local authorities and NHS trusts, as well as education estates, are under huge amounts of pressure, aren't they? We're always talking about targets. We've got 20 local authorities got 2030 targets, NHS 2045. We've got an overall 2050 target. What do you think makes projects financially viable?
In simple terms, having the money to do it. But we're talking about organisations that don't have big coffers of pots of money to invest in novel stuff, and this is still seen as novel, which is just madness, really, but it is. The temptation is to start with the things that generate a return. So solar panels and perhaps EV charging points, or creating your own heat network or something like that, something where you can generate power or generate heat and save money along the way, and perhaps supply to somebody else as well. They're always the first starting points. But that leaves behind and kind of cherry picks all the good stuff, and then you're left with net zero neighbourhood and retrofit and dealing with huge swathes of domestic residential, which are really hard to deal with. And they're where a lot of net zero challenges lie, because that's generating loads of carbon and is reliant so much on fossil fuels to heat and power homes. I suppose what makes it viable is, well, in my view, and that's just one view, is blending everything together where possible. Understanding what good returning projects are, such as solar PV or wind or something like that, and blending that with less attractive, commercially attractive projects to make a package of projects, a bundle of projects in which investment can be levered. But of course, that isn't going to work on its own either, because a lot of the private markets and the big insurance companies, investment companies, they want more stable investments and tend not to put certainly debt into these projects. It's always risk equity and therefore high cost of finance. And then that's kind of scuppers the whole thing. So it needs a public sector anchor leverage of finance to tempt in the private money. It needs public money to de-risk those projects first, to bring in the private money coming afterwards. So public money has to act as a first loss, if you like. There are many ways you can do that. The biggest ticket is, how do you convince the public purse holders to put that bit of money into that bit of that bundle of projects to lever in the private money? It's two things. It's convincing the private sector that we've got a de-risked, stabilised cash flow, a pension fund can put their money into long term, but first convincing the public purse holder that this is the project to put your money into because it will attract the private money, but also deliver this golden ticket of social value IRR. So it'll decarbonise, it'll deliver, it'll make economic uplift, it'll deliver jobs, it'll make cleaner air, and adding up all of those benefits and saying, well, look, we've got a whole gamut of benefits here for this project, and in exchange for these benefits, purse holder and policy holder, we would like the money to make that happen. It's really hard because even if all of your economic benefits stacked up massively dwarf the amount of money you're asking for them to lever in the private capital, it's still a real struggle to convince them to do it because they're getting these offers and requests from everywhere. So there's a finesse, a skill, an art and a science all together there.
And indeed, we have seen incredible progress, though, over the last few years. And we are making, we see it at Salix all of the time. We just through one of the schemes we deliver, which is the public sector decarbonisation scheme. And we see how the funding that we're helping deliver on behalf of government acts as a trigger, which is what you're talking about. It acts as a trigger to then encourage further investment. We see incredible projects, and whether it's heat network projects, whether it's air source heat pump projects, and how that is having an impact on that community. Because you've just talked about, economic uplift and jobs, of course, and then of course cleaner air, which has got to be better. It's a win-win, isn't it? It's got to be better for all of us in terms of that environment factor. And then the comfort, of course, which is really important to make these buildings more modern and nicer to be in, whether it's your library or leisure centre.
Absolutely. And that is always, but shouldn't be overlooked, is the clean air and warm, dry homes. It's just the connection between having those two things and then in 25 years' time, not having loads of people going to hospital is really, really direct, but hard to calculate. The preventative care model that the NHS is attempting to move to, which is effectively a fence at the top of the cliff instead of an ambulance at the bottom of it, is supposed to be moving quickly into that model, but it isn't. But what we're talking about is exactly that. Where we can give people clean, warm, affordable homes, the NHS is going to have much fewer people to treat later on. But squeezing money out of them to pay for all of that now is almost impossible.
And from your experience, what do you think then gives investors confidence in the public sector net zero infrastructure that we have? What is it really that's going to give that kind of confidence to lift everything?
Well, I've been doing this a long time, and it's quite hard not to be cynical about all this, but the answer is stable, reliable, long-term cash flows, which is why all the big institutional investors traditionally have invested in property and in income strips on public buildings and anything that's got bricks and mortar where somebody needs to be in it because we're not making any more land. They love that because they get an income strip return, because their job is to pay their pensioners or their insurance payouts when they pay and to make that money grow. The stringent investment committee and regulations they have on what they invest in means that they will only go for the most risk-free, if you like, projects, which net zero projects don't really sit in that bucket. It is, of course, no coincidence that the pension funds and the insurance companies have literally all of our money sitting in a bank, grown and grown and grown because of that attitude. If they were just looking to pay the pensioners, then they'd probably have a little bit more than they've got pensioners to pay out, but they haven't. They've got 1,000 times more than that. Attracting their money, it needs to be clean, stable, and long-term growth.
And do you feel, because you've obviously got a financial head, and I'll hold my hands up, I'm not, I don't necessarily have a financial head. Do you feel that you're always facing that kind of a struggle, really, with making, for yourself in your day-to-day job, with making the figures work, giving people the confidence to invest, but also talking about that social value, which you obviously feel very passionately about?
It is a struggle, but there are lots of little wins along the way. There are responsible investors and there are really clever people in government that see the vision and value the concept of a social value IRR, where you can demonstrate it using the proper Green Book Treasury guidance and say, here is a economic benefits calculation using your guidance that gives you a package of benefits. There are some strong leaders in government that do recognise that and say, okay, this is worth some capital pump priming. Equally, there are some responsible investors out there that want to be social impact investors, which is more than just social impact in front of the word investors, which many of them are, but some of them aren't. And they do want to, and they will accept a lower return because they are delivering some benefit. But outside of that, it is a struggle because commerce and social value very rarely meet in the same room. We have to be realistic about the fact that it's a capitalist endeavour, and if you're asking somebody for money, then they want some return.
But looking ahead 5 years, what changes do you think would make it easier for the public sector and all of us to accelerate the impact of climate change? But we're looking at kind of averting the worst, aren't we? What do you think? What do you think it looks like?
It needs change at all levels. So in changing communities where people come together and optimize all the things that they're doing from house to house, community to community to minimize their waste, minimize their carbon and minimize their footprint in that regard. And there are great community groups that do that, but then they're limited. They stop at a certain threshold because they don't have the money or the reach or the growth potential to do anything further. So that's one level. And then you've got all the businesses, but businesses want to make money because they're in business. So they need to be forced. And then you've got investors and governments, and investors want to make money and governments want to govern. But they need to be forced too. So I don't know what the answer is, but is it concessionary loan rates for all net zero projects as part of a giant spearheaded program to get solar panels on every single building in every single place to make a dent in it? I mean, I think it's the size. Is it the size of Spain? We have to build a solar panel the size of Spain in the Sahara Desert, and that'd be enough power for everybody forever. And that would cost the same.
I haven't heard that.
It's about that. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, and the cost of installing that in the Sahara Desert would be the US defence budget for the next 8 years. But someone's got to force that to happen. But at a practical level, concessionary loan rates to developing countries, industries in this country trying to deliver panels and heat networks and everything else mandated on those investors. So they must, and I'm not talking silly, like, you have to lend at 1% or whatever it might be, but just something that is deeply concessional to what they would normally lend at, so that it doesn't break the model. So we don't need to double everybody's heat and electricity price to go net zero. So it can be something manageable for the end user.
You're having these conversations all the time. You're having these conversations with government. You're talking all of the time about how you can kind of finance this work and bring people together. But do you think the average person, like me, do you think people on the ground actually appreciate that getting that financing framework right is key to how we tackle our climate?
No, I think they just think the government should pay for it all, and that there is money for them to do that. And I dare say there is a lot of money that's probably put into the wrong places, like, I don't know, defence or attack or whatever the ministry does these days. But there's money to be spread into different places that's part of policy control and short-term governments. But it never gets there. I think the average person thinks the government should pay for it all because it has a responsibility and a duty of care to the people over whom it governs. So I think that's what the average person thinks. I don't think they realise that there just isn't any capital sitting in a pot somewhere waiting to be spent, and they're choosing not to do it. I think they just think it's there. They don't realise that all of our cash is tied up in pension funds.
Financing aside, what next for you and your own career, and of course for the Global City Futures? What next for Global City Futures? The strategy over the next year or so. But what about you? Where do you see your future?
Here, but forwards. Yes. I want to keep expanding our business, but not for the sake of expansion. We want to expand to do more of the right projects and be able to continue to do more of the right projects. So we want the space and freedom to back sustainability and affordable housing programs that make the difference and are going to see a pipe and a spade in the ground or whatever it is on a more frequent basis and at a higher scale. And I want to be part of that. And I've got an amazing team of people behind me that are way brighter than I am and way more capable. And they're all, with every day, learning to be better than they were yesterday. And before long they're all going to be doing the job I do, which is exactly what I want. So and then I'd like to make new hires and have that grow underneath them and expand in that way, but it's a process.
It is. And that's a wonderful thing, isn't it, to have fantastic people around you, but to be in this area where there is so much change so fast, whether it's technology, whether it's financing, whether it's skills. But we are, for one thing, there's a huge amount of passion, and by working together, all of us actually, we're kind of making a difference. We are making a difference. Thank you very much to Roli Martin for joining me today and for providing such insight. There can be no doubt that climate change is the biggest challenge of our time. Today, we must reduce greenhouse gas emissions to slow global warming. Today, we must act for tomorrow, adjusting our lifestyles to current and future impacts of climate change. Today, we must use our collective wisdom to deliver on our climate commitments. Today, we work for tomorrow's world. Don't forget to tune in to our podcast channels and do email us at podcast@salixfinance.co.uk with your ideas. Thank you very much again to Roli. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Decarbonisation Dialogue, a podcast from Salix. For more information about our work and to find more content, please visit salixfinance.co.uk/podcasts.